Sometimes the hardest thing to do is cut someone off, but the moment you realize that their presence is holding you back from reaching your fullest potential, the decision becomes much clearer. It's not about hate, it's about growth and self-respect. In moments of self-discovery, I have learned that letting go of toxic relationships isn't an act of anger, but of self-care. The more I focus on myself, the clearer I see how fast I need to distance myself from negativity. It's not easy, but there comes a point when you realize that cutting ties is necessary for your peace. My emotions are a reflection of my growth, and sometimes that means leaving behind the things and people who no longer align with who I'm becoming. I've spent too much time giving chances, but now I've learned that protecting my peace means not allowing anyone to drain my energy. It's no longer about waiting for change. It's about honoring myself. I've realized that the most powerful thing I can do for my own peace is to set boundaries. And sometimes that means cutting ties with the people who try to pull me back into old patterns that don't serve me anymore. You don't always have to explain why you cut someone off. The decision speaks volumes about your self-worth and your determination to move forward into a space that supports your emotional well-being. Growth isn't easy, but sometimes it's necessary. When I recognize the toxic patterns in my life, I choose to distance myself. It's not about animosity, it's about self-preservation. I've learned that sometimes cutting someone off is a gift to yourself. It's not about abandoning others. It's about choosing not to accept less than what you deserve. As I grow, I'm learning to choose my peace over everything. Cutting off people who no longer have a positive impact on my life is a step towards the future I deserve. At some point, you realize that your mental and emotional health is worth more than holding on to relationships that have run their course. Letting go is an act of self-love. The path to self-love is often paved with difficult decisions. Cutting ties with the past, even if it's painful, opens the door to a future filled with growth and new opportunities. You don't have to tolerate negativity or poor treatment. When your self-worth is in question, cutting someone off can be the most powerful act of taking back control of your life. I've realized that being around people who don't appreciate me is a slow death to my spirit. So I'm choosing to cut them off and breathe again. I deserve to be surrounded by those who elevate me. Some relationships are meant to teach us a lesson, not last forever. Cutting someone off might be the hardest thing, but it's also the bravest. I owe it to myself to make space for my peace. I've spent too long trying to fix things, trying to make people understand my value. But now I understand that my worth doesn't need validation from anyone. Cutting ties is my way of reclaiming my power. The more I prioritize my well-being, the clearer it becomes that cutting ties is sometimes the most loving thing I can do for myself. No one has the right to drain my peace anymore. Cutting people off isn't always easy, but I've realized that some people are meant to be chapters in my story, not the entire book. I must keep moving forward to write my own ending. When the weight of toxic relationships becomes too much to bear, the best thing to do is release them. It's not about anger, it's about the freedom that comes with self-respect. I've learned that sometimes you need to protect your energy. Cutting someone off isn't about being heartless. It's about preserving the peace I've worked so hard to build. Walking away from certain people is never easy, but sometimes it's necessary for growth. My peace, my happiness, and my future matter more than holding onto the past. It's not always about severing ties with hate. Sometimes it's about knowing your worth and realizing that you deserve better than what you've been accepting. The moment I decided to stop tolerating disrespect was the moment my life began to change. Cutting ties was my first step toward honoring my own feelings and my journey. Cutting someone off doesn't mean I don't care. It means I care more about my peace, my happiness, and the life I'm building for myself. The pain of letting go is temporary, but the peace that follows can last a lifetime. I've learned that cutting off people who no longer serve me is an act of self-care. Sometimes the only way forward is to leave people behind. It's not about forgetting them. It's about choosing not to carry their weight anymore. My feelings are valid, and I've learned that cutting people off is sometimes the only way to protect my emotional well-being and create space for the right people to come into my life. The hardest decisions are often the best ones. Cutting someone off isn't a sign of weakness. It's a demonstration of strength and self-respect. There comes a time in every relationship where you have to ask yourself, is this adding value to my life? If the answer is no, cutting ties becomes the best act of self-love. I've reached a point where I'm done explaining myself to people who don't value my boundaries. Cutting them off is my declaration of respect for myself. It's not about being cold. It's about choosing peace over pain. Letting go of people who no longer fit into my life is my way of making room for joy and growth. There is power in choosing to walk away. Cutting ties isn't a sign of weakness. It's an affirmation of my plan and my commitment to my own happiness. It's not easy to cut people off, but I've learned that protecting my peace is more important than holding onto relationships that weigh me down. When I cut someone off, I'm not giving up on them. I'm simply letting go of the things that no longer serve me. Sometimes self-care is about walking away. People come into our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Sometimes cutting someone off is just part of the natural progression of things, a way of creating space for better opportunities. The best thing I can do for my growth is to let go of what no longer serves me. Cutting ties with people who don't support my journey is a necessary step towards a brighter future. There's no room for toxic relationships in my life. Cutting people off is my way of protecting my heart and soul so that I can keep moving forward with purpose. I've learned that walking away is sometimes the bravest thing I can do. Cutting someone off isn't about leaving them behind. It's about making room for my own growth. I've realized that I am not responsible for people who refuse to meet me where I am. Cutting them off is a necessary step in protecting my emotional health. Cutting people off doesn't mean I don't care. It means I care enough about myself to no longer accept anything less than what I deserve. In the process of cutting people off, I've learned how powerful it is to choose myself. My peace is priceless, and I will no longer compromise it for anyone. Some relationships just don't fit anymore, and that's okay. Cutting ties is my way of acknowledging that it's time to move on to something more aligned with my truth. The more I cut people off, the more I realize how freeing it is to let go of what holds me back. It's not about anger, it's about peace. I've learned that cutting someone off isn't about being petty. It's about honoring myself. It's about creating space for the right people and experiences to enter my life. Cutting people off doesn't always come from a place of resentment. It comes from a place of realizing that my happiness and well-being come first. Sometimes you have to remove people from your life to make room for the right ones. It's about choosing relationships that nourish me, not drain me. Cutting ties doesn't mean I don't care. It just means I'm choosing to care more about my own well-being than about holding on to something that no longer serves me. I've learned that cutting people off isn't always about anger. It's about self-love. Protecting my peace is the ultimate act of self-care. It's hard to let go of people, but I've realized that the more I hold on, the less room there is for new experiences and growth. Cutting ties is part of moving forward. The decision to cut someone off is never easy, but I've realized that it's the healthiest thing for me. My emotional well-being is worth more than any relationship. Letting go is never a sign of weakness. It's an act of strength, recognizing when something or someone no longer fits your life. Sometimes cutting someone off isn't an act of anger. It's simply recognizing that it's time for you to move on. Your life is too precious to waste on negativity. Letting go of people who drain your energy is one of the most empowering things you can do for yourself. Cutting ties isn't about them, it's about you. I've learned that I don't need to explain my decision to anyone. If you don't respect my boundaries, I have no obligation to keep you in my life. Cutting people off isn't about punishment. It's about freeing myself from emotional chaos and making space for my own peace. I am learning that sometimes love means letting go. Cutting someone off is not always about ending a relationship. It's about ending the cycle of hurt. The decision to cut someone off doesn't come from a place of hate. It comes from a place of clarity and understanding that some relationships just aren't meant to last. It's not always about cutting someone off in anger. It's about making room for healthier, more positive connections that contribute to my growth.